Hello, everyone. I'm Rev Karla, and this is Spirituality Matters. I'm so honored that you're here. I believe that we can create a holy space from the place where I am and there where you are. And if we just know that this is our intention with mindfulness and love and compassion, you do not have to be in the room with each other. You don't have to be in a church pew. We can be together in sacredness in this moment. Now, I have been teaching for many years, and I've just recently started writing again, and it has been wonderful. And today I have something I want to share with you. The teaching is titled Before I Knew Better: My Regrets After Deconstructing. So if you are deconstructing, I think this is something that you're going to want to stick around and hear, because that's what we've tried to create with this space. This is a space for those healing from religious indoctrination. And a lot of times what accompanies that is shame. And you have learned some type of spiritual superiority that is masking this sense of arrogance and entitlement and privilege that you have. I know right out of the gate, that's a lot to handle, but it's very important that we are very truthful about our indoctrination and how we might still be carrying some of those things. So let's get right into that. So this is really a story about me, but I think it will have relevance for you as well. And this isn't about to shame that version of myself, but to be honest about who she was. Because I think that can help you, whether you're deconstructing or you're reconstructing. We have conversations about all of that wherever you are on your spiritual journey. We have conversations about all of that. So what did that look like for me when I was really in that high control religion? Well, first of all, I thought I was doing God's will. And I certainly thought, I believed that we were the chosen ones, just as we were taught from the church pulpit every Sunday, and we were taught that in Sunday school. And we also believed that everyone else who didn't believe like we did was going to hell. And that changed a little bit. Those beliefs changed a little bit as I navigated through progressive Christianity. And I want to pause here for just a minute, because I know sometimes, especially if you're deconstructing or you're new to this, there may be some phrases or some words or labels that we're using that you just aren't clear about. Do not be ashamed to comment and ask a question or submit a question to us, because we are going to start taking your comments and questions and responding to them in helpful ways. So if you ever have something that you want explained a little bit more, just let us know, that we understand that that's part of the journey from deconstructing, because a lot of times the walls around you when you're in that type of high control religion are really, really high. They don't want you to learn from other people. I remember when I felt like I wanted to go to seminary, the first person, because I was always taught when there was a life change, you go see your pastor to seek advice from your pastor. That's exactly what I did. And you know what he said to me? You don't need to go to college, Sister Karla. All you need is our outpouring school of ministry. I kid you not, because anything that was out of their control was a threat, anything. So I knew then, I thought, that's wrong, but I tried it out. That's a story for another day. Let's keep going on this. But anyway, just don't be afraid to ask, because I understand how oftentimes they keep you willfully ignorant for a reason. I also believe that we had the right to judge others. Ouch, that really hurts. There's still a lot of people out there doing that, but it absolutely was true. And to judge was to be godly, because it was almost impressiveness that there was a sign that you believed in the system that said you had the right to judge, and that you were the chosen ones, and that you were drinking the proverbial Kool-Aid, like you were part of them. So you weren't afraid to express your faith in judgment and condemnation of others, right? That's a lot. So that's the preface to what we're going to talk about today. And as I was writing this, a quote came to me, and it's this: do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Now that is attributed to Maya Angelou. And she isn't necessarily talking about personal growth. And let me pause there again. I say that because even Maya would say when she used that in her speeches and stuff, she wasn't the first person who said it. But it has been attributed to her and very much part of who she is and her identity, because her teaching certainly exemplified that. And so she very much has the right to claim that as her own. But she also said that she wasn't the first person to say that. She just didn't know who to give it credit for. So that's the reason why I said that. But she wasn't talking about just personal growth. She was talking about what it means to have moral accountability and about choosing transformation when truth confronts your comfort. Now, in the blog that goes along with this that you can find over at Substack, I talk about Maya Angelou saying that she was trying to be a Christian. That was her way of showing her humility, in saying that it was almost impossible to do that. So if you're interested in learning more about her, you can go find information over at Substack at Rev Karla. Now, we can also admit that deconstructing is not comfortable. I'm just going to say this. If it isn't uncomfortable, you may be doing it wrong. And I know that deconstructing isn't the same for everyone, and all of us have different experiences. And I do believe that the higher control religion, the fundamentalist, evangelical type control, where you are basically told not to think outside of what your religious indoctrination, those probably harmed people more. But that isn't to say that whatever your church experience, you certainly have the risk of being harmed in some way, or you believe in your moral or spiritual superiority. And when you start to peel back those layers, that's a little tough, because you're not only having to look yourself in the mirror for who am I now that I'm no longer who the church says I am. How does the world see me? Before we didn't care. Now we do, because we want to integrate in it. Hopefully we do. We want to integrate back into our lives in different ways. A lot of times we're establishing new relationships because so much of who we are was left behind when we deconstructed. So when you think of that and you think about how you're seen in the world, that can really lead to a lot of really eye-opening, really challenging things that need to be faced when you're deconstructing. So if it's been a piece of cake for you, you might want to revisit. And I think that's why this conversation is so important, because, and this is the next part of that phrase, the last part of that phrase is then when you know better, do better. The problem isn't not knowing. The problem is knowing and then not changing. And many of us were taught that righteousness means standing firm in your beliefs, even if those beliefs cause harm. So this is about, again, get all of us getting a little uncomfortable, because when we look back at some of our religious experiences in that high control Christianity, especially this MAGA style evangelicalism, where you judge everyone and believe that your beliefs should govern the way government works, schools operate, personal lives are run, these people that are entrenched in that do know better. They're choosing not to. At least some of the church leaders do. If you're just gulping down everything that the church leaders do, your naivete doesn't excuse you from any of the toxic, caustic behavior and the harm that you're causing. But the church leaders certainly know, because they have access to truth, to history, and the real life consequences of their theology. They're out there in the world. They're leaders. They're politicians. They're business people. And when you have to rewrite history and ban books and suffocate science-based data, and when you're dehumanizing people, and when you're indoctrinating people to protect the white Christian man to be in leadership, then you know what you're doing. You know you are manipulating lives to benefit your beliefs. You are putting your beliefs over the existence of other people to live free from your beliefs. That's oppression. And when we're brutally honest, we understand, especially here in America, that Christianity in that vein, in that heritage, has been used for centuries to justify the continuing oppression of people. Black, Indigenous, and people of color primarily. And yes, women, not, and so you compound that, the intersectionality of a Black woman and how much more she has had to endure just to exist. Again, that data is being suppressed because they do know better. They're choosing power over people. They're choosing greed over doing what's right. And this has nothing to do with a God. It's about a religious system that wants to perpetuate a patriarchal structure for their own good and no one else's. That's all they care about. And that's why this conversation is so important, because that could have been us. In many ways, it was us. And by us, I mean the deconstructing. And also by us, I mean me. I was that person. I have to own what I believed and what I thought about others in the world. And recently, I've been sharing much more about that journey. Obviously, I shared it with my book, which is back there. There it is. I share a lot in my book, but this is essential to part of your healing, admitting that we were part of the problem. Because if we haven't deconstructed from that, our ability, our potential to harm someone with are still some of those indoctrinated beliefs about our behavior and our values are still in us. So we used that at one time as a birthright. And if we're not picking up the mirror and looking at that, then we still have the capacity to harm someone else. Because for many of us, and I see this a lot in the creator world, you deconstruct, you're on the deconstructing path now, you plop down in front of a camera, you look right back at the church and say, you're the problem, you hurt me, you're doing this in the world, and you want them to and own to it. But here's what's true, and I want you to hear this. Unless we are willing to see the complicity, in our complacency, we will never thoroughly peel back the layers of our deconstruction that compelled us to believe that we are morally and spiritually superior to the rest of the world. I don't think I need to repeat that. We have to make sure we are peeling back, and this is something that we will continue to do when we have committed to the deconstructing path. And I know that's very difficult to hear, but in this part's too, I know everybody hates, so many people are offended when we talk about the Christian Karen, because why does Karen have to be stigmatized? I'm a boomer. I hear things all the time that are stigmatizing about boomers, but it's just the way our culture has picked up that word. But the problem is, if we are not actively looking at our complicity in our complacency when we were indoctrinated in that, then we're still carrying some of that ability to be complicit. We are not safe. We are not safe to the people that we now are trying to integrate into and be a part of their lives, because we're starting to see the world through a different set of lenses, but we still have a lot of work to do. So the harm that is caused is often real, but we have to be able to be brave enough to look inward. Because if we don't, we can become very judgmental. We can actually start shaming people for not being as awakened as we are. I actually see this all the time. All the time. And we can assume that our current beliefs, our current deconstructed beliefs, make us more moral or evolved. And even though we can see ourselves and feel ourselves awakening, we need to be careful about how we are using and talking about our deconstructing journey. We don't have the right to judge to the point that we're once again wielding superiority over other people, because that is not liberation. That's just recycled indoctrination. You're doing it again, my friend. You're doing it again. Don't be that deconstructing Christian. If we're deconstructing, we're going to peel back all the layers. So let's talk about this, pause, breathe about it, and give ourselves space to kind of think about it and see if this is something that's impacting you. Now, as part of this blog that I wrote on Substack, you can find it there. That's my dog crying, so he's sound asleep now. So this won't be edited it'll be edited very lightly, so you're going to get my dog sleeping. He's reactive, and so he has a lot of nightmares. So let's just breathe into that with him. Now, in that blog, I did create a list, and I call it like my mirror of who I was before I knew better, and who I am becoming now. Did you hear what I said there? Who I am becoming now. The list changes because some things rise up for me more, things that I'm challenged with, things I'm working on, corrections that people have offered me, or insights or memories that come up like, oh yeah, I thought that. Oh yeah, I did that. And so it's kind of a way you can use that as a way to help you kind of think of your own list. Before you knew better, who were you? What did you believe? And now that you're deconstructing, who are you now? What do you believe? I'm just going to give you a couple of them, and then we can kind of just talk. We can just talk about it and see what you see. But if you want to see the entire list, just go back to the Substack. So here's a few of them. Before I knew better, I confused obedience with holiness. Then I began to question whether blind submission was ever sacred. Before I knew better, I believed God wanted perfection. Then I began seeking a divine rooted in compassion and not punishment. Before I knew better, I kept quiet about injustice. Then I learned that silence in the face of harm is complicity. Now, this isn't a checklist. It's just kind of an awakening, an evolving, if you will, that just kind of sees like, where are you and how does it change? I know even from 6 years ago, some of the stuff I wrote right after I was ordained, which is now 8 years now. Oh my goodness. My language has changed, and the things that I believe are continuing to change. So we want to leave room for that, because you'll see soon enough where you're landing, where you're being invited to explore. And I'm just going to say this really quickly because I did post about this week. Deconstructing should not be assumed that means you're looking for a church that's more aligned with your beliefs now, just because you left high control evangelical church. I just have to say that because I'm really starting to get sick and tired of how many people are proselytizing that aren't from the evangelical church. Y'all are just the same. Stop it. Let people find their own spirituality. Progressive churches have their place with people looking for that type of spirituality, but it is not necessary. It's not, your spirituality is not contingent upon being connected to a church. So I'm just going to say that, and I'm sure I'll say that more as time goes on. So there's nothing about deconstructing that should be about you becoming perfect. Obviously, we're human. It's about becoming more true, more whole. And that's going to be a process, because becoming more whole is becoming more aware, more honest, more empathic, more open to other people's ideas. I don't think that Maya Angelou was ever trying to be a saint. She just said she was just trying to be a Christian, and that led her life in so many ways. And obviously, I think she was already a great example of a Christian, even though there are many Christians who criticized her for who she was. So maybe the point isn't to prove our spiritual worth anymore. Maybe the point is to live in such a way that, flaws and all, we land gently on the right side of history. Not because we never caused harm, but because when we knew better, we chose to do better. So, as unchurched, deconstructing, and now some of us who now use former Christians, we'll be talking a lot about that here, it's just time to reconcile who we once were to who we are becoming. Because to see you, to bring that along with you, not in a way to create guilt and shame, but to own it and see how it's pointed you to hopefully a gentler, kinder, humble person who's showing up for the good of the whole, and understanding that we have a whole lot to learn from people that we never even wanted to hear from before. How exciting and beautiful and wonderful that can be. So we're only human, we're not perfect, but can we today show up as a better version of ourselves? And tomorrow commit to show up a little better, and the day after a little better, and so on and so on. So that maybe someday we can be content that we made a life worth living, and that somehow we do indeed land gently on the right side of history, just as Maya did. May it be so. I don't have this part memorized, but this is your closing. Thank you for being here today. If you're walking your own path on healing and untangling, I hope you know you're not alone. My book, well, there it is. Deconstructing is available now. It's my story about leaving harmful religion and finding a spiritual path that feels like home. And if you're looking for a quieter, deeper space, I am on Substack, and we are getting ready to expand some of what I'll be offering there. So that's where I share a lot of my own, the personal writings, and we're going to be having a discussion circle very, very soon to help you on your spiritual journey and your spiritual transformation. So you are warmly invited to be a part of that. Until next time, stay awake, use your voice, and don't give up hope. Don't ever give up hope. I'll see you soon.